Right, let's start this tutorial on inequalities. Now, what an inequality means is basically not equal. So it's the signs when you have like a less than sign. So for example, x is less than 4, or you have x is less than or equal to 4, or I could swap it around to have the greater than or equal to 4 sign, or x is greater than 4. So all of those are inequalities. They basically mean not equal. Now, inequalities are particularly similar to equations when we're solving them. The only problem with inequalities is that dividing or multiplying by a negative number means that you have to be very aware of the inequality sign, and I'll explain that in a second. Other than that, inequalities and equations are very similar. With inequalities, as with equations, what you do to one side, you do to the other side. But if you divide or multiply by a negative number, you need to swap the inequality sign around. That's really the only big difference with inequalities. So you need to swap the inequality sign around if you divide or multiply by a negative. So let's look at some examples. Now this is an example of where you have two sides of an inequality. There's minus 3x, which is apparently greater than or equal to 2x plus 10. So this is a linear inequality. So we do exactly the same thing as we've done with equations. With a linear equation, you get your x's to one side. So with a linear inequality, you get your x's to one side. So I'm going to minus 2x from the right hand side and minus 2x from the left hand side. Now there's nothing wrong with minusing 2x. I don't have to change the inequality sign around. So minus 3x take away 2x is minus 5x. 2x take away 2x disappears, so I get negative 5x is greater than or equal to 10. I don't change the sign around because I'm minusing 2x. Now I need to isolate x, so I'm dividing by negative 5 on both sides. But because I'm dividing by a negative, my inequality sign swaps around. I get x by itself, and 10 divided by negative 5 is negative 2. So please note the swapping in the inequality. Other than that, I approach this inequality exactly as I would have done an equation. X is to one side and then isolate x. So they're pretty easy things. Example number 2 is an example where we have a three-sided inequality because we have 10 is greater than or equal to 2x plus 10, which is greater than minus 2. So there's almost three sides to this inequality. Thing I've got to remember is what you do to one part of the inequality, you do to all three parts. So if I'm trying to get x by itself, what's attached to x, which I need to get rid of? Well, I need to get rid of the 2, and I need to get rid of plus 10. Now, I always get rid of the things furthest away from x first. So I'm going to minus 10 to get rid of it. But if you minus 10 from one part, you must minus 10 from both other parts. So I get 10 take away 10 is 0, is greater than or equal to. The sign doesn't change because I'm subtracting 10. I'm not multiplying or dividing by a negative. 2x plus 10 minus 10 just leaves you with 2x is greater than minus 2 take away 10 is minus 12. Now all I've got to do is get rid of the 2, which is attached to x through multiplication. So I divide by 2 everywhere. Each part needs to be divided by 2. Now I'm dividing by positive 2, so I don't have to change my inequality signs around. So I get x by itself, 0 divided by 2 is 0, negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. Now you can always tell if you're right, because does it make sense that x is bigger than minus 6 but less than 0? Is that possible? Can you be bigger than minus 6 but less than 0? Well, let's draw a number line. Here would be minus 6 on the number line, and here would be 0. Can you be bigger than minus 6 but less than 0? Yes, that makes complete sense. So you can always tell whether your inequality makes sense. Right, let's do one last example, which is simply difficult because of the fractions. But I'm going to do it exactly the same way as I do an equation with fractions. First of all, if you remember our equations with fractions, I'm going to put a bracket around that numerator, because otherwise, when I multiply by my lowest common denominator, it's going to get very confusing. I'm allowed to multiply by any number I feel like, as long as I multiply both sides by that number. So I want to multiply by my lowest common denominator. So what is the lowest number that 3 goes into and 2 goes into? That's 6. Now that means I need to multiply both sides by 6 if I want to make a correct statement. So I can multiply that side by 6 as long as I multiply each term on the other side by 6. So minus 1 minus 2x over 2. I'm going to multiply by 6. Actually, I'm going to put it this side because I'm used to putting my numbers in front of a bracket. Now, why this works wonderfully, I haven't broken any rules because I've multiplied each term on both sides by 6. And 3 goes into 6 twice. So I'm left with 2 times this bracket is greater than 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. And 2 goes into 6 3 times. So I get minus 3. And look how important my bracket was. Otherwise, I would have forgotten that it's minus 3 times the whole numerator. And back to an easy linear inequality. Now I'm going to solve this exactly how I'd solve an equation. I would multiply out, so 2x minus 4, 9 minus 3 plus 6x. I get my x's to one side, so I'm going to minus 6x on both sides. So I get minus 4x. Minus 4 is greater than 9 take away 3 is 6, plus 6x minus 6x disappears. Now I'm going to plus 4 to both sides. So I get minus 4x is greater than 10. And finally, I can divide by negative 4 on both sides. So nothing that I've done here has been at all different to a linear equation until the last step. Because if you divide by a negative in an inequality, you must swap your sign around. Now, I would use my calculator to figure out that this was negative 5 over 2 if I don't like fractions. So that was done exactly like we do linear equations. The only thing is when you divide by the negative at the end, you must swap the inequality sign around. So if you're good in equations, you're generally good at inequalities. Just don't forget about dividing or multiplying by a negative. Now what I would do is I'd pause this video, I'd write down these questions, and I would solve these inequalities. Don't forget to check if your answers make sense. Good luck.